The flashing blue lights reflected off the neat row of identical houses as the police cruiser pulled into our cul-de-sac. I stood there cradling Max, my German Shepherd service dog, who was whimpering and pawing at his eyes. Across from me stood Karen Williams, the HOA president, her finger jabbing in my direction as she marched toward the arriving officer. "That's him, officer. He's violating our pet policies repeatedly. I want them both removed from the premises immediately." Karen's voice carried across the entire neighborhood, ensuring everyone could hear her righteous indignation. The officer approached calmly, taking in the scene. When he noticed Max's distress, he knelt down beside us. "What happened to the dog?" he asked, his voice suddenly taking on a professional edge. "She sprayed him with pepper spray," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady despite my rage. Karen scoffed loudly. "It's just a dog and it's not supposed to be here." The officer's face darkened as he gently examined Max, immediately noticing the service dog vest and tags. "Ma'am, is this a service animal?" he asked me while reaching for his radio. "Yes, sir, fully certified. I have all his paperwork." The officer stood up slowly, and I noticed the K9 unit patch on his uniform for the first time. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "I'm Officer Reynolds K9 handler with Metro Police. Did you just pepper spray a certified service animal?" Karen's face went from smug satisfaction to confusion. In an instant, she hadn't noticed the patch. "I never wanted any trouble when I moved into Oakwood Estates 6 months ago. After 15 years in the Army and 2 tours in Afghanistan, I was looking for peace and quiet. The neighborhood seemed perfect, well-maintained lawns, friendly neighbors, and a location close enough to my physical therapy appointments. Yes, there was a homeowners association, but I figured that just meant the community would stay nice and orderly. What I didn't count on was Karen Williams, the HOA president, who ruled over Oakwood Estates like her personal thief. She was in her late 50s with a perfectly maintained blonde bob and a perpetual expression that suggested she just smelled something unpleasant. From the moment the moving truck pulled up, she was there with a 3-ring binder of regulations and a critical eye. "We have very specific guidelines about exterior modifications," she informed me as movers carried in my furniture. "And I should tell you now that pets aren't allowed in common areas." That's when Max trotted up beside me, his service vest clearly visible. "Max isn't a pet," I explained politely. "He's my service dog. I'm a disabled veteran, and he's trained to assist with my PTSD and mobility issues." Karen's eyes narrowed as she looked from me to Max and back again. "Well, that sounds convenient. Everyone claims their dogs are service animals these days just to get around the rules." I took a deep breath and reached for my folder of documentation. I have his certification right here, along with a letter from my doctor explaining his necessity under the Americans with Disabilities Act service animals are. "I know the law," she interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Just keep it under control and make sure it doesn't bother anyone." She walked away muttering something about people always finding excuses. Little did I know that this brief interaction would set the tone for months of escalating harassment. At first it was just the glares, whenever Max and I would take our morning walk. Then came the friendly reminders about HOA policies slipped under my door, each one highlighting different regulations about animals. Despite the fact that service dogs were legally exempt by the 3rd month, Karen had started documenting our every move. I'd catch her taking photos from her porch when Max and I were in the community garden. Once she even followed us to the mailbox, staying 15 feet behind, while ostentatiously covering her nose and mouth. "Some residents have severe allergies, you know," she announced loudly enough for the entire street to hear. "It's very inconsiderate to expose them to animal dander." When I pointed out that Max was hypoallergenic and groomed daily, she simply huffed and marched away, phone already in hand, as she typed out what I assumed was another complaint to the HOA board, which he controlled with an iron fist. The situation took a dramatic turn on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. Max and I had just returned from the park where we'd met with my support group of fellow veterans. Max was impeccably behaved as always, and I was feeling better than I had in weeks. That sense of well-being lasted exactly 3 minutes after we arrived home. I had just retrieved my mail when Karen came storming out of her house across the street. Her face was flushed with anger, and she clutched a manila folder that I recognized as her violation documentation. "That's it. I've had enough," she shouted, marching straight toward us. Your mutt is leaving fur all over the sidewalk. I've documented 17 separate incidents of neighborhood contamination. Max moved closer to my leg, sensing my anxiety rising. Karen, Max doesn't shed. We've been through this. Don't you care me? Her voice reached a pitch that made neighbors peek through their blinds. I am the president of this HOA, and I will not be disrespected in my own community. I tried to de-escalate the situation. Look, if you have concerns, we can discuss them at the next association meeting. I don't need a meeting to enforce the rules. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small canister before I could process what was happening. She aimed it directly at Max's face and sprayed. The effect was instantaneous. Max yelped in pain and collapsed onto the sidewalk, frantically pawing at his eyes and whimpering. My service dog, my partner who helped me through panic attacks and nightmares, was writhing in agony on the ground. "What have you done?" I shouted, dropping to my knees beside Max. "That's a service animal. What you just did is a federal offense." Karen took a step back, but her expression remained defiant. He was threatening me. I felt endangered. Max, a professionally trained service dog who had never shown aggression in his life, was now curled up in pain, eyes swollen and breathing labored. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "I need police and animal emergency services," I told the dispatcher. My voice breaking, "Someone just pepper sprayed my service dog." To my shock, Karen pulled out her own phone. "Two can play this game," she announced before making her own call to 911. "Hello, yes, I need police immediately. There's a man threatening me with an aggressive dog." I had to defend myself. 5 excruciating minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. Karen immediately rushed toward it, waving her arms. "Officer, I'm so glad you're here. This man has been terrorizing the neighborhood with his dangerous animal." The officer stepped out, and I recognized the K9 unit insignia on his uniform. He took one look at Max, saw the service vest, and his entire demeanor changed. "Sir, what happened here?" he asked me, already kneeling to examine Max. "She pepper sprayed my service dog because she doesn't want him in the neighborhood," I explained, still trying to comfort Max, who was trembling against me. Officer Reynolds nodded and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, did you use a chemical agent on this animal?" Karen lifted her chin defiantly. "I had to protect myself. That dog is a nuisance and a threat to our community." The officer's voice became very measured. "Ma'am, are you aware that this is a certified service animal?" "He just says that to get around the rules," Karen insisted. "Everyone does it these days." Officer Reynolds stood up slowly. "Ma'am, I'm a K9 handler. I work with service animals every day. This dog displays all the training markers of a legitimate service animal, and the owner has proper documentation." He pointed to Max's vest. "What you've done constitutes assault on a service animal, which is a felony under federal law." Karen's face went pale, but it's just a dog. "I'm the HOA president. I enforce the rules here." "HOA rules don't supersede federal law." "Ma'am, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." As Officer Reynolds read Karen, her rights neighbors began emerging from their homes, watching in shock as the all-powerful HOA president was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser. A second police car arrived, along with animal emergency services, who immediately began treating Max. "Is he going to be okay?" I asked the veterinary technician anxiously. "Yes, we're flushing his eyes and giving him medication for the pain," she assured me. "Service dogs are resilient, and we've treated pepper spray cases before." Meanwhile, Karen was having a complete meltdown in the police car, her voice still audible through the closed windows. "This is ridiculous. I pay the highest HOA fees in this neighborhood. I'm calling my lawyer." "Do you know who I am?" Officer Reynolds approached me as the animal medics continued working on Max. "Sir, we'll need your statement and all of Max's documentation for the report. Assaulting a service animal carries serious penalties." "I understand," I said, watching as several HOA board members who had arrived began huddling together, whispering urgently. 3 weeks later, Karen's life had imploded spectacularly. She faced federal charges for assaulting a service animal with penalties, including up to 3 years in prison and fines up to $25,000. The HOA board unanimously voted to remove her as president and banned her from holding any position within the association. Again, the most shocking development came when 2 other residents came forward After seeing the news coverage, both were disabled individuals with service animals who had moved away from Oakwood Estates after experiencing similar harassment from Karen. Their testimonies strengthened the case against her and revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior. That horrified the community when Karen appeared for her preliminary hearing. Gone was the confident, imperious woman who had terrorized our neighborhood. Instead, she looked shrunken, her face crumpled in disbelief as the judge denied her attorney's motion to dismiss the charges. But Your Honor, her voice cracked as she interrupted. It was just a misunderstanding about a dog. I can't go to prison for this. The judge's gavel came down with finality, and Karen's shoulders slumped as she realized that for once her actions had consequences. She couldn't talk her way out.